I'll never forget the day that I went window shopping, and the window shopping was for a very special thing. It was to pick out that special, unique, very expensive and glamorous engagement ring for my wife. The reality is, I asked my wife to marry me when we were both in college. Neither one of us had jobs. And so that engagement ring was probably a little less glamorous than what most people would maybe desire to get for their beautiful bride-to-be. But my wife was gracious. She accepted it. But I can remember going through that diamond store, looking just very specifically at all the specific diamonds, and you'd look through this little magnifying glass, and you'd, rate them with color and all this kind of stuff. And there was some that I really wanted, and yet I couldn't afford them, and so there was that whole dilemma. But I picked out the ring that I wanted, and then I picked a different diamond on a different ring, and then I had those two fused together so that I felt like I had just the ultimate gift to give to my wife, who was going to have that ring until death do us part. And so that's a significant thing. A couple years ago, we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. And so like any guy who just wants his bride to be something special, there was always those moments in the grocery stores when you look next, the woman that's ringing up your order, and her ring just has this huge rock, on her finger, and knowing that your wife doesn't really have that. And so on our 10th wedding anniversary, I did a lot more window shopping, and I finally was able to come home with this ring that I always wanted to get my wife, and finally was able to afford to do that. And the reality of that is that the diamonds, they're a very precious stone. I mean, they're valuable, they're delicate, and yet they're strong. They're just beautiful. They take a lot of time to produce. If you study how a diamond is made, it's a chemical of carbon that's under the Earth's layer of crust. And as those minerals come forward with heat and pressure through a whole bunch of time, eventually you have this creation called a diamond. And so you've got all these different various degrees of diamonds, but with that diamond process, there's just tons of pressure. There's tons of things that go into creating this beautiful thing that is created. And I just want to read out of Romans chapter 5 real quick. It speaks to this idea that we ourselves are under this constant pressure, and that life produces this pressure all around us. And I love what he says. He says, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character. Character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out over our hearts through the Holy Spirit, which has been given to us. The reality is the Spirit of God lives inside of us, but what God is most concerned about is the processes that we go through in our lives. Take the diamond analogy, if you will, for just a moment as I think about this ring and the diamonds that create this ring. We all got things in our life, and we got seasons in our life, and maybe you're in one of those moments right now where you feel like the world around you is just kind of pressing in, and you feel like there's no way out, and sometimes you wonder, why is God giving me what you feel like is more than we can ever handle? And so we've got this great thing, and yet we know that the Bible promises, and the Bible speaks often, that God is more concerned about the processes of our life than what He is with really the end result. The promise of God is that the end result will always be beautiful because it's all about Him. But where we're at and where we have the stakes in this whole deal is in the processes of God. And sometimes we think that our most darkest hour, the reality is when we look back on that, those dark moments that really define us are really the things that God was working in us the most and really creating that masterpiece that He's always longed for. And the reality is it's a masterpiece that He's created because He lives inside of us. I want to read real quick just one more passage in 2 Corinthians. And it talks about this whole idea of us being created in the image of God. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, it says, "But we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that the surpassing power belongs to God, and it does not belong to us. We are afflicted in every way, but we're not crushed." I love this. "We're perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We're persecuted, but we're never, ever forsaken. We're struck down, but we're not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus Christ, so that the life of Jesus may well be manifested inside of our bodies." And then here's the end. It says, "For we who live are always being given over to death," which is that pressure, if you will. We're always being given over to this death so that we might really have the life of Christ inside of us. So I just want you to pause right now and just think. You know, wherever you're at, whatever season in your life, on those moments where you really feel like God, maybe it's God Himself refining us, but maybe it's things that we've created ourselves, and we've created this pressure because of things that we've done inappropriately. And so you take these pressures, and I want you to just pause right now and to reflect on those pressures that you've been through, and if possible, to look back and see where God has brought you through, so that we can fully understand that God has us exactly where He wants us, and He is more concerned about the process, albeit painful, to create us into that masterpiece He's always longed for us to be. I think there's great news in that, and I think there's great news for you and me, that knowing that He who began a good work in us will always complete it on that day.